Look at Jack and learn from him." The sentence landed hard enough to quiet the room. Dana Rusk didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her hand rested lightly on the conference table, fingers spread, the posture she used when she wanted attention without asking for it. Jack Nolan straightened in his chair. A modest smile appeared, rehearsed but effective. Around the table, a few heads nodded. Someone scribbled a note. Dana's gaze moved on, already satisfied. Then it came back to me. "He makes half of what you do." The words were delivered almost casually, like a footnote. A comparison meant to sting, not invite discussion. The kind meant to put someone back in their place. I didn't look at Dana. I watched Jack instead. His mouth opened, then closed. He shifted again, repeating a phrase I had used 2 weeks earlier in a closed-door review, something about throughput constraints compounding downstream. He said it smoothly now, like it had always been his. The room waited for me to respond. Nothing came. "My name is Marion Klein. I have spent over 20 years inside manufacturing plants, learning which problems can be solved with charts and which ones bleed onto the floor if you ignore them. I built the improvement proposal they were applauding, every assumption, every contingency. I had presented it once, quietly, with data instead of polish." Dana flipped a page in her binder. The meeting was ready to move on without me. I reached for my badge. The click of plastic against wood cut through the silence. Conversation stalled. A pen froze midair. Dana finally looked up. "I'm resigning," I said. The words didn't rush. They didn't shake. Effective immediately. A chair scraped back. Jack's confidence flickered, just for a second. Dana's mouth formed my name, but I was already standing. I walked out without another sentence. The story you are about to hear is a fictional work created by the writing team at Her Fear. Each chapter explores power, silence, and the moments that change how a woman values herself. While inspired by real workplace dynamics, the characters and events are imagined, crafted to reflect emotional truths rather than literal history. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. My phone vibrated before I reached the exit. I let it keep buzzing as the door closed behind me, carrying the weight of the room I had just left and everything it had chosen not to see. No one followed me into the parking lot. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. Doors closed, engines started. The plant kept running, just without me in it. I sat in my car with the key turned halfway, listening to my phone vibrate against the console. I let it ring until it stopped. It started again almost immediately. I answered on the third attempt. "Already tired. This is unnecessary," Dana's voice came through first, clipped and controlled. No greeting, no pause. "You made it dramatic. I made it final." A breath on the other end, paper shifting. She was already reframing. Jack was representing the team. That's how these things work with corporate. "The team," I repeated. My hands rested flat on the steering wheel. "Since when does representation replace contribution?" "That's not what I'm saying." Her tone tightened. "Corporate responds to confidence, to clarity. Jack communicates well. So does a microphone," I said. "That doesn't mean it builds anything." Silence stretched just long enough to register. "Marion," she continued. "Slower now. This isn't personal. It's about optics. Corporate needs a face they recognize. My work needs a name," I said. "Preferably the right one." Another pause. The sound of her exhale came sharp, irritated. "You're overreacting." I let that sit. Didn't rush to fill the space. When I spoke again, the question landed cleanly between us. What did Jack actually build? The line stayed quiet, not disconnected, just empty. "I don't see how that's relevant right now. It's the only thing that's relevant." She shifted tactics. "We can talk about credit later. What matters is keeping leadership aligned." "With what?" I asked. "A story." Her voice cooled. "You're letting pride get in the way of progress." I watched a truck pull out ahead of me. Familiar route, familiar faces inside, none of them looking back. "Then let Jack handle the progress," I said. "He's already got the spotlight." The call ended without goodbye. I started the engine and drove away. The silence settling in where explanations should have been. The proposal opened exactly the way I remembered it. Same structure, same sequencing, same language. The efficiency model loaded without errors. The assumptions aligned. The contingency notes still embedded in the margins the way I always left them plain. Cautious, deliberate. Nothing had been altered. Nothing improved, nothing replaced. I scrolled. The version history told a quieter story. My name filled the timeline until the final entry. Then Jax appeared, added less than an hour before submission. No edits, no comments, just presence. I leaned back and let the silence settle. My phone lit up with a message from Maya Chen, one of the line supervisors. You okay? Heard you walked. I did. I typed. Clean break. A pause, then figures. He never understood that plan. I didn't reply. I opened my email instead. Dana's forwarding trail sat there, unembellished. My original subject line replaced. Jack's name placed neatly beneath it, as if it had always belonged there. Her note to corporate was short, confident. Jack has done exceptional work consolidating this strategy. He'll walk you through implementation. I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no confusion in the wording, no accidental omission, no room for interpretation. This wasn't miscommunication. It was choreography. Another message came in from Maya. They asked him about downtime thresholds yesterday. He froze. I closed the laptop halfway, then opened it again, scrolled back to the appendix. The downtime thresholds were there, clear as ever. I had written them after a 12-hour shift, sitting on the edge of a loading dock with grease on my hands. The phone rang. Dana again. I let it go to voicemail. The message arrived seconds later, clipped and urgent. We need to clear the air. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I archived the message and shut the laptop. The truth was no longer something I needed to remember or defend. It was documented, timed, signed. Walking out hadn't changed what happened. It had changed what I could finally see. The email subject line didn't explain itself. Quick clarification. I almost deleted it. Another forwarded thread. Another request meant for someone else. Then I read the first sentence. Are you the one who built the throughput model Jack presented last quarter? I didn't answer right away. The cursor blinked. Patient. I read the line again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change. It didn't. My name sat in the recipient field alone. No one copied, no manager hovering. I closed the laptop and let the moment breathe. The phone rang 10 minutes later. An unfamiliar number. I answered without greeting. A man spoke carefully, like he didn't want to spook me. Marion Klein. Yes, this is Paul Weaver. I oversee operations for a regional supplier outside Dayton. We've been trying to track down the person behind that model. Behind, not in front of it. I'm listening. He continued without filling the silence. We sat through Jack's presentation. Slides were clean. Delivery was smooth. But when our team started asking implementation questions, the answers stopped matching the math. I waited, so we asked around. He added, Your name kept coming up. That's interesting, I said. I wasn't aware my name was part of the conversation. It wasn't, he admitted. That's what made us curious. He didn't rush after that. Let the pause do its work. We're not looking for another presenter, he said finally. We need the person who understands what breaks when the floor pushes back. My grip tightened around the phone. Not from nerves, from recognition. You're assuming I'm available. I'm assuming you know whether you are. Another pause. This one lighter. I built it. I said, all of it. His relief was audible. Good. Then we're speaking to the right person. He outlined the problem in fragments. Bottlenecks, missed targets, a system straining under decisions made too far from the floor. Nothing dramatic, just expensive. We're prepared to move quickly, he added. If you're open to a short engagement. I glanced at my unopened inbox. Dana's messages sat unread, stacked neatly. Send the details, I said. I'll review them. When the call ended, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt momentum. The plant manager didn't ask for a presentation. He pointed down the line instead. If you see something we're missing, say it now. I followed him onto the floor. No conference room, no projector, just noise, motion, and operators compensating for problems they had learned to live with. A woman in a faded safety vest watched me study the line. Her badge read, Maya Chen Line Supervisor. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush to explain, just waited. After a few minutes, she crossed her arms. Everyone who comes through here talks about speed. Nobody asks why Station 4 keeps stalling. Because Station 3 is feeding it uneven batches, I replied. The buffer looks fine on paper, but the timing's off. Her eyebrows lifted, not impressed, alert. You sure? She stepped closer to the console. We adjusted that twice. Both times upstream, I said. The problem isn't capacity, it's sequence. She stared at the screen, then at the operators, then back at me. Show me. We changed nothing that afternoon. Just observed. Counted. Timed. The operators relaxed once they realized no one was there to blame them. The next morning, Maya flagged me down before I reached the line. We tried your sequencing adjustment on second shift. I waited. Cycle time dropped by almost 7 minutes per batch. She hesitated. That shouldn't have happened. It should have, I replied. You were forcing the line to recover from a problem it didn't cause. By the end of the week, scrap was down. Throughput was up. Not dramatically. Just enough to matter. The plant manager met me near the exit. How long did this take you to see less time than it took to ignore it? I said. He nodded once. No praise, no ceremony. Later, Maya handed me a cup of burnt coffee. Most consultants explain what they're doing while they do it. I prefer to wait, I said. Results speak more clearly. She took a sip, then glanced back at the line. They listened faster this way. So did I. The first message came from someone who used to share my shift schedule. Scrap jumped again. It read, "No one's owning the call." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A second message followed an hour later, this one from a maintenance lead I trusted. Downtime doubled on line 2. They're waiting for direction. Waiting for direction had never been the problem. Avoiding it was. By mid-afternoon, the pattern was clear. Missed handoffs, delayed decisions, small problems allowed to stack because no one wanted their name attached. Jack's name still sat on the plan, but his presence stopped at the edge of commitment. A voicemail arrived from the plant. I recognized the cadence before the words registered. Marion, it's Maya. I shouldn't be calling you, but they're asking Jack to sign off on changes. He keeps saying he needs more data. I pictured the proposal open on a screen somewhere. The thresholds highlighted. The contingencies spelled out in plain language. The data had never been the obstacle. Another call buzzed in. Unknown number. I let it go. A minute later, an email notification chimed. From corporate operations, subject clarification needed. I didn't open it. The next message came through as a text. Shorter than the others. Can we talk? Donna wrote, no apology, no explanation, just the request. I set the phone face down and finished reviewing the week's numbers from the outside plant. They were holding, improving, quietly doing what systems do when someone makes decisions instead of deferring them. The phone vibrated again. Same contact. No added urgency in the words, just repetition. Please. I picked it up and typed 3 letters, then erased them. Typed again, erased again. A new message arrived before I could decide. Corporate is asking questions. That one stayed. I didn't respond right away, not out of spite, out of clarity. The story they had been telling required me to stay silent. The system they were running required someone else to carry the weight. For the first time since I walked out, those two things were no longer aligned. I placed the phone back on the desk and returned to the numbers, letting the imbalance announce itself without my help. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 months after I walked out. I recognized the number and let it ring once before answering. Marion? Dana's voice sounded thinner than I remembered. Careful, measured. The edge had dulled. Corporate is flying in. I stayed quiet. They want a full review of the improvement plan, she continued. Implementation, gaps, variance from projections. I waited for the rest. It came slower. They're asking for you. The word you landed heavier than anything else she'd said. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the notes from my current engagement. Neat columns of figures behaving exactly as expected. Decisions made, adjustments owned. No confusion about who was accountable. By name, Dana added, as if clarifying might soften it. They specifically asked if you were available. My response came without heat. Is Jack still leading the rollout? The silence that followed wasn't technical. It wasn't a bad connection or a delay. It was a choice. I could hear movement on her end. A chair shifting, papers being stacked and restacked. A habit she had when she needed time. That's complicated, she finally said. I didn't interrupt. They expected him to execute what he presented. She went on. But corporate keeps asking questions he can't answer without looping in 3 other people. And the answers don't align, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. They want consistency, she said carefully. They want someone who understands the logic behind the model, not just the outcome. I let that settle. We can discuss terms, Dana offered. The sentence carried weight, even without specifics. Whatever makes sense. I glanced at the calendar on my desk. Full, productive. Mine. I'm not coming back as an employee, I said. No emphasis, no explanation. I understand, she replied too quickly. I stood and walked to the window, watching a forklift trace a familiar pattern below, steady and deliberate. Send me the details, I added. And the scope corporate expects. Her exhale was audible this time. Relieved. Uneasy. I'll have them over today. When the line went dead, I didn't feel victorious. I felt the shift. The balance had already moved. Dana didn't waste time once we were on the call. We want you back, she said. Same role, same scope. We can adjust reporting if needed. I let the offer sit untouched. I'm not returning as an employee. Her response came quickly. Rehearsed. We can revisit title, compensation, visibility. I'm not negotiating a position. I said, I'm defining a boundary. A pause followed, longer than before. Then what are you asking for? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't soften it either. Independent consultant. Paper rustled on her end. That changes the structure. It changes the leverage, I replied. She exhaled through her nose. Go on, 5 times my previous pay. Hourly, not a bonus, not deferred. Another pause. This one sharper. That's significant. So is recovering a failing rollout with corporate in the building. Silence again. I waited it out. I present directly to corporate and plant leadership. I continued. No intermediaries. No summaries filtered through management. Dana didn't interrupt this time. My name appears on every document tied to the implementation, I added. Proposals, revisions, reports, no exceptions. The line stayed quiet long enough for me to hear a second voice join her end. A man this time, calm, precise. This is Harold Vance, he said, Human Resources. We'll need to formalize the engagement if we proceed. Of course, I replied. You'll also include an authorship clause. He hesitated. Clarify. My work is credited to me, in writing, across all internal and external communications. Dana spoke again, measured. If we agree to this, you understand there's no path back to your previous role. I understand, I said. That's the point. Another quiet exchange I couldn't hear, muffled, deliberate. When Dana returned, her voice had changed, less directive, more careful. Send us your contract terms. I didn't smile. I didn't rush. I'll have them by end of day. The call ended without ceremony. I closed my laptop and stood, the weight of the decision settling cleanly into place. Fear had nothing left to negotiate with. The conference line opened without small talk. Corporate had flown in that morning. New faces, sharp eyes. People who didn't know the history and didn't care to learn it. They wanted answers that worked. Dana introduced me by name, not title, not role. Just my name. I stood, connected my laptop, and began walking through the model from the beginning. No shortcuts. No polish. Just logic. Cause, effect. Consequence. A vice president near the end of the table leaned forward. Jack, he said, without looking up from the printout. Can you explain why the buffer threshold on Station 3 was set where it was? Jack shifted in his chair. Papers rustled. He cleared his throat. That was based on overall throughput targets, he offered. We assumed what the vice president pressed. Jack glanced toward Dana. She didn't move. The data suggested he stopped. Started again. The model accounts for the sentence never landed. I didn't interrupt. I waited. Another executive spoke. Calmer this time. Marion. Can you walk us through that decision? I stepped forward. The threshold compensates for upstream variability. Without it, Station 4 absorbs the shock and downtime compounds. I tapped the screen once. That's what's been happening. No one asked me to slow down. No one challenged the explanation. Heads nodded. Notes were taken. The vice president closed the folder in front of him. Thank you. He turned back to Jack. You're being reassigned to planning, effective immediately. Jack's face drained of color. He didn't argue. There was nothing left to borrow. The vice president's attention shifted to Dana. Technical approvals will route through corporate until further notice. Dana nodded once, tense, contained. The meeting ended without applause. As people filed out, One of the executives stopped beside me. "We should have asked sooner, you did," I said, eventually. I packed up my laptop and left the room without waiting for anyone to follow. The truth hadn't needed volume, it had needed timing. The first week back, no one asked for reassurance. They watched instead. I walked the floor with the supervisors, adjusted the rollout in real time, signed off on changes when the numbers justified them, and stopped others when they didn't. Decisions moved faster once accountability had a name attached to it. The line stabilized. Scrap fell. Downtime narrowed to predictable windows instead of surprises. Dana stayed out of the room unless invited. When she spoke, it was to confirm, not direct. Jack never appeared on the floor again. By the third week, corporate stopped calling the work a recovery and started calling it a baseline. Expansion plans followed. Another plant requested an assessment, then another. My calendar filled without me chasing it. Harold sent the finalized contract extension late one evening. The authorship clause was still there, untouched. My name appeared where it always should have. "Looks good," I replied. "Proceed." I never took my old badge out of the drawer. When implementation wrapped, Dana asked if I wanted to stay on longer. The offer was careful this time, stripped of assumption. "I'm already staying," I said. "Just not the way you're used to." She nodded. No pushback, no persuasion. The system had adjusted. Months later, I passed the plant on my way to another engagement. Same building, same gates, different relationship. I didn't slow down. I hadn't exposed anyone. I hadn't demanded apologies or forced confessions. I had removed myself from a structure that depended on my silence and sold my clarity back on my own terms. That was the consequence they felt. And here is the lesson I carried forward with me. Respect is not something you earn by waiting. It arrives when you stop accepting terms that erase you. The moment you choose your value over your comfort, the door behind you doesn't just close, it locks. And the world adjusts to where you now stand.